cybersecurity that sells. We'll be having a look at the MSP blueprint for building scalable cybersecurity packages. We have Libby Robinson, who is our director of product marketing here at Field Effect. She brings over 10 years in the cybersecurity space alone, but she has experience in both product management and product marketing. So what she does at Field Effect is she works as a two-way bridge between the engineering side of the house and the sales and marketing side of the house and does that translation, which is awesome. And then we're also joined by a surprise last minute guest here, Marty Landry, filling in for Sean. Um, Marty, of course, is our Vice President of Sales here at Field Effect, brings over a decade of experience in managing partner relationships across multiple sectors. He's a trusted IT advisor and loves helping partners grow. So welcome to Marty.
Apologize to everyone who is hoping to get their dose of Sean today, but I'm certainly happy to be here, and it's always fun when we get to talk to our partners and prospective partners, so should be good.
On that note, we'll get into the topics that we're going to cover throughout the next few minutes here. That I will say that the angle for this one, Marty and I, did run one of these in the past, and actually got a lot of conversation started. It kicked off a lot of questions, a lot of follow up on it. This one is we wanted to go through it again, and we also wanted to sort of focus in on helping MSPs who might be dealing with maybe a slightly you know lesser complexity customers, or those who maybe are a little bit further away from, yes, I need, I'm ready for cybersecurity. So that's going to be kind of the focus of on the audience here for that group. First, we're just going to kind of go through like to that, like especially to that crew, selling cyber is hard, right? So we'll kind of talk about why that is the case, and what are some ways to get around that, and then talking about when we're in the sort of the world of packaging. Um, some things some things work, some things don't. This is kind of a joke that this was a potentially deep thought here, but the idea that everyone's kind of going through, like, sorry, most MSPs sort of go through this journey, and so really want to help you guys with like what are the things that just work really well, what are the elements that are necessary on a journey, and then maybe some pitfalls to avoid there. One of them being, sometimes we get into this mode of, well, let's have our customers let us know what it is that they need and what are some of the challenges there. So down to three there, and then getting into some hot tips. So we really do, when we do these webinars, we want to leave you guys with something you can walk away with, some specifics, some action items, that kind of thing. So we'll kind of get into some takeaways there, and potentially some teasers for next session there. And then at the end, wrap it up with the Q&A. So the first element here is that there's no getting around it. Just as delivering cybersecurity is, cybersecurity itself is complex in nature. Selling it can be tough too, right? And that's for a variety of reasons, and it's different for different audiences, right? So I was talking about this level who might not already be kind of fully bought in, or might even not recognize that they need it. So it can be a tough market to sell into on the MSP front for your customers. So before we dive into sort of what we've seen as kind of like the ones that we hear all the time as to why you guys are facing challenges selling this to your customers, I want to throw out a poll, and just to sort of get some insight into what you guys are seeing here. The top one, no surprise there for sure.
This is sort of what we see. Definitely the last one is very unfortunate, right? No urgency until there's a
Yeah.
breach. We do incident response here at Field Effect as well. Not for current clients, fingers crossed, but we have, MSP partners that either don't have a subsection of their base on the service yet that gets breached, or, we get calls from legal or insurance firms or whatever it might be. And our conversion rate on those incident response to MDR afterwards is quite high. But yeah, unfortunately, it's like, until it's too late, you don't realize that it's a problem, right? So that one's tough, and I think that one really feeds into sort of that risk-based approach and how like a dose of proactive management can really help, versus being too late and then having to deal with things afterwards. Suddenly, it doesn't seem like it's a cost, right? And so I think like a way that we can help sort of mitigate that is by telling those stories to our clients and really helping them to take a risk-based approach, right? And really understand that, what the implications will be for their business. So try to use real world examples for clients in their industry that you've seen, right? So you can sort of draw parallels that might hit home to them for those specific things. And I think in some cases, what clients assume is, hey, I'm not big enough. Cybersecurity doesn't need to be a big issue for me, or I have antivirus, and hey, it says virus in the name. I must be protected, right? And so, yeah, it's really about educating them in those situations that like the cybersecurity industry has changed drastically in the past year, in the past 2 years, and certainly legacy tooling like antivirus, something that was effective or maybe not about 15 years ago, is not going to cut it today. And I always use the line that you're literally required to have an AV installed. So every single breach that has happened in the past however long, that business has had antivirus and a firewall. And they're still getting around it, right? So I think it's really helping them understand that in today's day and age, you require visibility. And so you're going to require a different set of tools to protect them from today's threats, just in the same way that physical security has evolved. And they used to maybe have a lock on their front door, but typically an office nowadays would have like a security system in place. And protecting your business physically, I would say that it's more important to protect it from cyber threats as well too, right? So really taking that risk-based approach is how I would attack the problem for those customers.
Yeah, and so Marty got so excited he was kind of getting ahead of the of the slides, but these are exactly it, right, Marty? And you've already touched on these so the two ones that we kind of wanted to dive into, and they are very intertwined, right? My clients do not view cybersecurity as a necessity, and my clients underestimate their risk. So all those things you're just walking through are pieces of that puzzle, right? And I think my clients do not view cybersecurity as a necessity. A lot of that is fed by their kind of misunderstanding of what the risk is for a number of reasons, right? So I think that some of the pieces that you talked on, or that you talked about as that risk first side of it. So apologies, I know I'm kind of jumping around slides, but this is meant to be more conversation than a walkthrough of slides anyways. So I think that makes sense. But certainly there's the risk in terms of how interesting interesting your clients are to a threat actor. And I think there's this, and I know it would be lovely if it were true, I suppose, but this sort of idea that, I'm too small, no one's interested in me, I don't, I'm not a company that has the huge bucks, they're not gonna come after me. There's not much in it for them. But I think, some of the advances in cyber threats and the access that threat actors have to evolving technology is that they can sort of set these things up. It doesn't always. So while it may be true that smaller clients aren't necessarily at risk of a major targeted and focused attack, it doesn't mean they're not going to be victims of sort of what we call a drive-by attack, right? And one of our analysts used to say, like, look, if you have $1,000 in your bank account, threat actor will take that and it'll skin off their back, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, $1,000 a day for someone on the other side of the world, $1,000 a day for someone here is a lot of money, right? And
Yeah.
you hit that a couple times, you can do pretty well. And inherently, I think as much as you said it, attackers are targeted, they aren't. Right? They leverage software inherently has bugs. We're still seeing things like, exposed RDP or unpatched software that's being exploited in the
Yeah.
wild. And inherently attackers use scanning tools like Shodan.io, right? And you can sort of educate your customers in this way that, they're just scanning the internet for sort of that unlocked door and unlocked ports. And if that happens to be you, they don't really care what industry you're in or what you do. they see an opportunity there as well too, right? And then, so first sort of educating them on how these things happen. And then secondarily is sort of educating them on quantifying what that risk looks like, right? So what would it look like for your business to sort of be down for days or weeks, or the brand reputation, working off pen and paper, all of those types of
Mhm.
things really start to hit home when they happen. And I think at the very least, you owe it to them to educate them and have these conversations, right? We shouldn't be afraid of having these types of conversations. If anything, if they do get hit and they do get breached, at least, and they don't take your security services, at least at that point you've informed them, right? So I think as a trusted advisor and as someone that they're trusting, you owe it to them to sort of let them know about how things have evolved and what you're seeing out there, and what type of visibility and tools that you require to be in place in order to properly protect them.
Yeah, and adding on to that, and now I'm jumping a bit forward to the hot tips section maybe, but you know sort of a summary and add on there is what we have found is education is necessary. And I love the term that you use there, Marty, like act as that trusted advisor, right? I think our advice would be to do so without leaning into fear mongering territory, right? Because I think that just gets people nervous. It gets their back up. They're actually less likely to listen if you kind of put them in that scared mode. So it's educating without instilling fear, right? It's like, here's the reality, but hey, these are things that we can help you with, right? As opposed to just slamming them with sort of more of those scary headlines and stats and stuff. So that's something that that the folks that you guys have access to on the sales team and our customer success team and all those guys, like you can lean into some of those speaking points with them as well, because they're really strong at it. Um, okay, so kind of moving on then, if we talked about what are some of the biggest challenges, and I think one of those things really does come down to the challenges revolve around the need for education, right? So if we move on to that and we say, okay, let's assume that you have that sort of education plan in place. Now let's look at cybersecurity packaging in the MSP world, because there's complexity everywhere and there's complexity in packaging too, right? And we see that across the board. So getting into like some things that work, some things that don't. Um, Really, there is an evolution that most MSPs have gone through or are going through. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to move from one to the other, but this is sort of what we tend to see in here. So kind of standalone, the good, better, best, where there's sort of three options. The all-in, where you kind of move everybody up to that model, and then have that sort of security as an add-on or premium package. So before we get into, Marty's going to kind of do a walkthrough of sort of the pros and cons of each of these things and maybe what you should be considering. We'll do a poll here. I'd love to hear which of the packaging you guys are making use of here. All in. Interesting.
Interesting.
Okay. Okay.
Very
So let's
interesting.
yeah, let's
Yeah,
get into this one.
yeah, for sure. And so we are seeing more and more people move to this model for sure, this all in, and so we'll get into sort of the pros and cons of each, right? So I'll sort of start at the top here, right, with a la carte, right? So when we think of a la carte, this is really, it's almost, think of it like your traditional resale model, right? So you might purchase an EDR and MDR package from a vendor for say $5, and you go ahead and you resell it for $10. Obviously the pros to this is it's a straightforward model. It's very easy to understand. You allows you to sort of capture additional margin, I guess, if you're layering on and you're itemizing things afterwards. But it's a very easy model for you to sell. It's easy to understand, and it doesn't really take into account a lot of your project work, or I guess your internal sort of cost of labor and things like that. And that kind of feeds into where I would say there's cons, right? So at this point, you're typically not selling a comprehensive solution. And so if you're working with an untechnical buyer, they may drop to the bottom, right? Or sort of it's a race to the bottom. If you don't put a value wrapper around the service, they can price shop and, find that same EDR, that same MDR vendor elsewhere, and it just becomes sort of a price negotiation. They typically, these types of clients typically don't understand fully the services that they need. And the other thing is you could be leaving money on the table with your margins as well too, right? So it makes it really hard to put a value wrapper around it. So I would really suggest this model only in situations where it's like a co-managed environment or it's someone that you do some project work for that it's a true resale. But typically, you can find yourself leaving some money on the table and selling yourself a little bit short as well too. So it has its place. But what we see a lot of folks migrating towards is more of either a good, better, best or an all-in model. I've seen an evolution from good, better, best to two packages, right? So maybe like to use our words, like a core and a secure or whatever it might look like, right? This is really offering multiple tiers to your customers, right? So, your good may just be endpoint protection. Your better, might layer in cloud and third-party patching and vulnerability management. And then your best may offer some type of, compliance framework mapping, log retention, or things for a specific need. The nice part is it allows you to be more to more folks, right? You're offering flexible models to everyone. The cons are that obviously you introduce yourself to the risk of folks just typically in this model, I would make the better package pretty good because people tend to gravitate towards the middle package,
The
right?
middle. Yep.
In these things, Libby will tell you that when you price things out. So you might want to make your middle package actually like where you'd like them to land in the best to really just be an add-on. But you could create gaps in your model as well too, right? So again, you're allowing your customer to choose what they see is best fit.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
totally. Sorry, I'm assuming you were about to move on to the next one. I'm not
Yep.
interrupting a train of thought. Okay.
Nope. Go
So
ahead.
the other option is on the when you're thinking about something like good, better, best, we call it that because that's mentally what everyone is familiar with, but it doesn't necessarily have to. Don't lock yourself into the best is where you put all the bells and whistles from a cybersecurity, and then you're just sort of like each package below that is sort of a downgrade in terms of cybersecurity offering. One thing that you might want to look at is think about who is who are my different profiles of customers that I have, and what is a solution that is right fit for them. So it's not really about saying, well, you can get this one, but you're not really going to get the security that you need. That one you can only get in this other package. But try to think about, okay, well, what is it that this profile of customer needs versus that profile of customer needs, and that can be based on industry. It can be based on on all different types of profiles. So don't lock yourself into just the like this one's okay from a cybersecurity protection perspective. This one's a little bit better, and then this one is the best. Try to also think about what is the profile, and then you can tie it to that. And that is one of the ways you can get away from to Marty's point, because it's exactly right that if not sort of guided and not tailored to what it is that somebody needs and can identify themselves with, they will just sort of, it's like 85% of people will just say, oh, that middle one must be, it's probably good enough. I don't need all the, I don't need the premium package. I can just get the sports package and I get everything I need kind of thing. So just wanted to add in there. It's like, think about how you're tailoring it for your audience, your different styles of audience too.
Yeah, for sure. That makes a ton of sense. And so as we move towards, and this is really interesting because I am seeing more and more partners move to a sort of an all-in model as well too. And typically this happens after they've experienced issues offering a tiered offering. Sometimes I've seen a partner move to this after experiencing a breach and sort of not going through that again. I'm going to be a trusted advisor, and everyone is going to be on sort of my managed service offering or managed security services offerings includes full MDR across cloud, network, endpoint. It includes XYZ on backup, and if you're not willing to commit to these things, then there's too much risk in me taking you on as a client. So it's definitely it's an aggressive approach. Right. So the pros to it is typically you're going to be able to pull more margin. I have an example of a partner that's done this and did introduce a price increase and said that they were sort of moving everyone into sort of one package all in. And ultimately the cons to it is you may lose some customers transitioning to that model too, right? So, but typically what happens is you sort of narrow your audience. And you end up working with folks that are really committed to sort of a higher level of security or a higher level of service. So in the case of this example, I think this MSP partner ended up retaining just over 90% of their base. So they did lose some customers, but based on the price increase that they're able to introduce with this offering, they more than made up for it. From a bottom line perspective as well too, right? So, and again,
Yeah.
it will sort of streamline your processes internally as well, but it does require a bit of a bold approach, and it does require that you're willing to really put yourself out there as a trusted advisor with your clients.
And I think, I think sometimes the reality is that, sometimes maybe there are a couple of customers that it's almost better for you to go through a hard breakup with, right? Like it's sometimes like they're you would just be carrying way too much liability, way too much risk if they're not willing to sort of come to the table at all with the cybersecurity, because then unfortunately, if something happens, they're likely going to point the finger at you and, well, why didn't you do a better job protecting me? And it's, well, because you didn't let me, right? So sometimes it's kind of like that not all business is good business kind of approach, right?
Yep, exactly. Right. So, and yeah, and those are conversations that you're going to have, and that's typically where I've seen MSP partners say, without this in place, I don't have the visibility I require to properly protect you from today's threats. A line like that, can at least spur some
Yeah.
conversation. Yeah. So, and then moving on to the last is, the way that we see some partners doing this is sort of, pricing out your traditional managed services offering and then having a security bundle as an add-on to that. Right. So this could be actually your most profitable because you've sort of got your profit margins built into your managed services model. Right. And then you're also going to take that and apply it to a security bundle as well, too. Right. So it does allow you could offer an all-in, package as your security bundle, or you could offer tiers, like in terms of compliance or vCISO services, or other services, incident response preparedness and things like that, and a security add-on, right? So, again, the cons would be that you do introduce yourself to some risk that either they don't take your security add-on or they start nickel and diming sort of based on SKUs and pulling things out and pulling things in when you're starting to layer on packages on top. But it is a method that we're seeing out there as well too.
So moving on to kind of getting into the hot tips and things to leave you with. So one of the things for sure that we want to leave you with is kind of going back to that. Marty has said it several times throughout here is this is really your opportunity to act as a trusted advisor to your clients, right? They may think they know more than they do. There's actually a question that I want to come back to later at the end, and they'll be like, "Well, I don't need that because I have backup." This sort of thing, and this is really your opportunity to sort of do that education as an advisor without that fear mongering, without the threatening or anything like that, right? And to have those to kick off those conversations. Now, getting into the next couple of slides, these are things that I often have conversations with our partners about is let's say now that you guys are you've fully nailed your packages. This is how I want to offer it. This is how I want to carve it out. This is how I want to this is how I want to build it out. The next thing is how do I position them? And so these next couple of slides, actually, we're likely going to follow up with a second webinar as a sort of a continuation of this topic to dive into some of this. So I'm not gonna go too deep in here. Just want to plant the seeds for now. But as we are, as we're once we have something built, it's really important to then think about, okay, well, now how am I going to convince people to buy it, right? And a lot of that comes down to, and I already mentioned it earlier on, was who is your audience? Who is actually buying this? And you really need to start there, and you need to start because you need to be able to put yourself in their shoes, because selling them things that you do, because we've already talked about the fact that there does need to be that education perspective. They do need to sort of be helped to understand that. So if you just sort of throw things at them, they're not going to understand, right? So in order to be able to sell to them and speak to them, you need to know who they are, and you need to know what their problems are, and you need to know what alternatives they're looking at. And sometimes that alternative is do nothing, right? So it's kind of starting with knowing who they are, and then being able to say, okay, well, what are the outcomes that person needs? One of little like a little uh, trick that I have used when I'm sort of building out personas is I think like, okay, this person that I'm going to be speaking to at the end of the year at their performance review, how is their manager going to judge their success or not, right? Because those are examples of things that are going to drive the decisions that they make in the business, right? Are they going to be judged whether or not they bought this tool, or are they going to be judged, on other business outcomes, right? How are they measured for success? And then you can sort of work backwards from there to put your proof points for that, and how are you going to deliver those outcomes, right? Anyways, as I said, I didn't really want to dive into it too much, because this can be a whole webinar of itself. And I actually have had a couple of our MSP clients where I've sat down and for like an hour on the phone and really dived in here and sort of provided worksheets to sort of help, how do I come to outcomes, how do I interview my customers to find out those personas and stuff. So there's a lot of stuff here. You can tell this is the stuff that gets me up in the morning. I love this kind of stuff in the product marketing, but it really is important, right, to be able to speak in their language in a way that is convincing. Marty, anything to add on the positioning side of it? Because I know you get in these conversations all the time as well.
I was just gonna say, yeah, like, listing out all the things that you're gonna be doing for them. It's a kernel level EDR agent and XYZ, and a lot of that can be overwhelming, and not maybe it's hard to understand. So just like you said, rather than SKU nightmare and listing out a bunch of features and benefits, really really focusing on the outcomes and what it means to them. So it might be like holistic 24/7 monitoring, of your entire IT ecosystem, right? Or whatever it is. So really getting to what that end game means, and what it means for them, and put it in words that they're going to understand, that are meaningful to their business, is how you want to be positioning and selling these services.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, one of the oldest examples of this sort of outcome selling, but it's one we've all heard and one we can all wrap our heads around, right? So it would be the difference between selling, supports hi-fi sound, supports OGG and Wave and WMA, and there's TF card expand, and it charges fast and all kind of stuff. And people be like, okay, okay, that's cool. Versus 1,000 songs in your pocket, right? That was the Steve Jobs Apple thing. It's 1,000 songs in your pocket. They didn't advertise on the things that were in the iPod. They advertised the outcome that you got out of it, right? So it's just sort of like that frame of reference there.
Yeah, and it's not easy, because those other things you mentioned are the things that excite us as tech
Yeah,
professionals, right? But it may not sometimes excite our buyers. So
yeah,
yeah.
unfortunately. The other thing is, okay, so once we've put the packages together, once we have the positioning framework in mind, there is how are you gonna price this, right? So there are a few options out there. There's sort of basically, if you come down to it, the highest level ones are, is it cost-based pricing, or is it value-based pricing? And there are lots of factors. Again, I'm not going to get into all of them today. If you're looking at something that is highly commoditized, you usually have to be looking at sort of a cost plus type pricing. If it's something that is really sort of unique and transformative, then you can go into value and into value based. Sometimes that can be a bit tougher, but if you can prove, again, if you go back to those outcomes and you can prove those outcomes, then we can do that. But really on the pricing stuff is that, like, these sort of bullets here are like examples of things you just kind of have to wrap your head around, right? You have to know all of your expenses, and not just, this is actually something that Marty speaks very well to. It's not just the cost of the tools that you have in place, right? It's like the human costs and the operational costs and all these other sort of your hosting costs, all these, really make sure you have a good a good view of everything. Marty, I know you often speak to the cost. Is there anything you want to add specifically on that point?
I was just gonna say that's probably the most common mistake that I see is folks adding up a bunch of tool costs and sort of saying those are my costs, and it kind of goes back to the the sort of a la carte. Now I'm going to mark it up to X without evaluating actually other costs like labor costs, the cost of managing the solution, how many
Yeah.
tickets is it creating, how much time are your techs spending on online with support, like those types of things all need to be built into pricing a solution and really evaluating solutions as well too, right? So eliminating tooling cost or consolidating tooling cost is one thing, but labor cost, that can really cut into your margins, right? So, what type of text do I need to use to manage this type of solution, right? What are some other things that I could open up for my business? How much more efficiency could I drive? How many more customers could I take on if I was more efficient in these certain areas? Those are, major considerations beyond just, the cost of the SKU.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think as I say, we definitely want to dive into this topic more deeply. So I think we'll probably keep moving for now into sort of the final couple slides here. So Marty, I'll let you kick us off with this one.
Yeah, and I'll sort of, dovetail off what I was speaking about there. So, a big one that, I think a lot of MSPs are dealing with right now is sort of vendor sprawl and tool sprawl, certainly, right? So, you're going to want to work to consolidate your tech stack, not only to reap sort of savings on tool costs, but again, drawing back to those operational efficiencies. The one thing that I would beware of as you're looking at sort of the term all-in-one and holistic that gets thrown around, significantly nowadays is not every solution is built the same, right? So be aware of three-letter acronyms like, oh, they say they do MDR. Or, is it MDR or is it really just managed EDR? What does it include, right? Does it include cloud monitoring? Oh, we released cloud. They do cloud monitoring too. Well, what are they doing, right? Are they just doing sort of identity protection, or are they doing, cloud security posture management? Are what are they looking at in the cloud as well too, right? What types of things are they alerting on? Do they do active response? Do they work with M365 and G Suite or just M365? So not all sort of cloud monitoring, not all MDRs are created equally. So I just beware of the marketing buzzwords and really dig in and ask those hard questions about what's included so that, you don't leave yourself in a spot where you think you're buying holistic security and then
Mm,
afterwards, you're left with buying a bunch of add-ons as you're evaluating your solution, right? And that's a really common misconception and a spot where, you thought that you had it all, but oh no, to get support or to get active response, I need to buy into XYZ package and it's going to cost me that much more.
yeah, and I think one of the from the marketing side of it, one of the frustrations is sort of the misuse of terms, right? So it's really hard for your customers to evaluate, well, this person says holistic here and that person says holistic here. Like what's the difference, right? So holistic in my mind goes beyond just the threat surface that you're covering, right? So Marty already touched on the active response side of it. So, how much proactively is your system able to do? How much can it reduce the noise, all that sort of stuff? And going even a step further, holistic in my mind is not just what are you doing when you see a threat, but how are you helping me prevent those threats from even coming in the first place, right? So for me, holistic includes that preventative side. Is sort of that, if you look at, if for those of you familiar with the sort of the NIST framework, it's looking across that entire framework as well. So don't get sucked into holistic means endpoint and cloud and network. It's so much more than that, right? It really is what is your ability to act, preventatively, filter through the noise, active response, flexibility within your given environment, all that sort of stuff. So all these things are really key to a holistic coverage.
Yeah, for sure. Dig into the acronym. If it's one thing to check a box, but what is that solution going to look like to your bottom line? What's the output of the alerts going to look like? Does it include, certain things in it as well too? And that really, sort of dovetails into the pricing that fits as well too, right? So, some vendors may try to hide costs as add-ons. I would always say that, in order to stay ahead of evolving threats, we want to focus on solutions that are including as much as possible, and then focus on vendors that, as they add things into the product as well too, are they constantly iterative? Are they constantly evolving? Is the solution getting better and better as well too? And how much are they listening to your feedback? How much are those becoming add-on costs? When we talk about billing, I always like to price. One reason why we bill per user is, that's typically the way that a lot of MSPs bill their customers as well too, right? So it does remove complexity from your billing models when, you can bill in certain ways, but also when you're evaluating vendors, it's an important question to ask, right? So billing per endpoint, billing per user could have different cost implications. Even if the SKU is the same price or a little bit more expensive one way or another, that device to user ratio may affect things as well too, right? So really digging into the billing model and how that's going to work over time are important considerations as well too. The next is going to be sort of like, what type of expertise are you going to get with that, right? So, unless you have a 24 operation yourself, right? How much of that is going to be taken on by whatever partner you align yourself with? Can they respond and monitor threats 24/7? What if bad things do happen, right? Do they have a team in place that can help you out with incident response? Are they covering the full spectrum? Can they provide, security consulting services as well too, right? So what is that vendor doing to let you know about current events as well too, that are going to sort of make you look like a hero in front of your customers as well? So
Hmm.
really the whole package, so that, you're not left managing a tool that, a big misconception that we see out there is, folks buying sort of best of breed or, whatever the latest analyst firm is saying is great technology, but they don't actually invest in the humans to be able to manage those tools as well too, right? So it's really looking at what's going to be the best fit for your organization and the makeup of your organization as well too. And then finally, is sales and marketing support, right? So, you want to align yourself with a vendor that isn't just going to sell you the solution, be happy with their invoice and then move on. It can be really overwhelming to start this journey. Having an expert that can jump on calls, again, help make you look like the hero, provide actual human resources, provide support. This dovetails greatly into this slide as well too, right? So for instance, I'd be remiss if we didn't say here at Field Effect, of course, we have a flashy partner portal with campaigns in a box and, co-brandable marketing materials. But we also believe on actually digging in with actual humans as well too, right? So, helping you sort of hop on demos, right? Providing sales engineering support. We're a channel-only company. The customer is certainly yours, and we would never overstep if you didn't want us to, but we do find that our close rates go way up when we can be involved in the process, especially at the start as you're getting used to the new solution and sort of the pitch and how the positioning works as well too, right? So making sure that you're going to have a team behind you, what type of assets they have in place. We have things like we can run an attack surface report, right? Which will help sort of give them an outside view on what we can see, some vulnerabilities that we see inside their network as well right now, right? So what is that vendor doing to sort of help you and your team sell the solution as well too? And then, lastly is what is that cybersecurity and what do those outcomes look like at the end of the day? What type of reporting, right? Because, fingers crossed, if you align with the right vendor, nothing bad is going to happen. So it's all about being able to show your value through reporting, and aligning with a vendor as well too. That's going to take your feedback, and put it into practice as well. Those are all really, really important considerations when entering a partnership and ones that we lean heavily on here as well too.
Yep. Sorry, I definitely jumped ahead. I was resting on my mouse, and then I figured once the damage was done, I might as well
All
just leave
good.
it here.
We were headed right there anyways, and it's one of the funner things to talk about, right? That's what I do. That's what we do every day with our partners. So yeah, that's the fun part.
Definitely. Awesome.
Helping them be successful.
Absolutely. And I absolutely like what you said there about, helping them to look like the hero, right? Like that's why we're in it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so on that front, that wraps up what we had today. I'm just looking through the questions. So one of the ones that is worth touching on here, because we always use the example of um, uh, well, I have an AV and I have a firewall, therefore I'm good, right? And so someone was asking, like, what about the customer who is like on a backup regimen and they just say, don't worry about it, we can just restore after an attack, right? And I think like, oh, well, I have backup, then I'm fine. And I'll let you speak to this because you probably see this a lot more. But again, without that fear mongering thing, I'm going to sideline because one of our SEs just came back, our sales engineers just came back from an event. He was on the floor chatting with an MSP who had said they had recently just brought on a new client from another MSP, and just as this client was being attacked. So it was great timing for them. So they were taking over this client as this attack was ongoing. And the customer said to them, "Oh, don't worry, we've been doing a backup. So no big deal." Turns out the backup was all online, and the threat actor was able to lock that one down too, right? So even sometimes I think with like, oh, I have a backup, there's like backup integrity and hygiene to consider. But I think maybe what people aren't considering there is I think there's this, I don't know, idealized notion that like, oh, well, I'll just, if I have the backup, then I can just go to refresh and start again. They're not thinking about all that productive time. The sort of the other ways that the threat actor might still be in there, might have time bombs, all that sort of the rest of the rest of the pieces, the land and expand. And Marty, I'll let you add on there.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, to that point, right? Backup is great. First thing an attacker is gonna do is try to disable backups.
Yeah.
If they don't and they're not successful there, are you gonna get backup in the are you gonna get your data back? Are you gonna get it back in the same form that it was in before? How long is it gonna take you to get it back? What type of downtime? Someone is still been through your house, rummaging through your drawers, taking pictures of your social security numbers, right? Probably offloading them to the dark web. A huge thing that we're seeing now is extraction, right? And selling
Yeah.
it on the dark web. So, some threat actors now aren't even, initiating with ransomware. They just actually want to go in, steal your data, take copies, go make some money and sell it on the dark web. And now you have passwords floating around. You might have social insurance information. As we know, most times after an attack happens, you're vulnerable. So now they've sort of been inside your house and, they're likely to come back, right, with that information that they've gleaned. So again, I always sort of take it back to that example. You walk in your house and, your drawers are all upside down and, someone's been rummaging through your stuff. I think you're still going to feel quite violated, right, in that sense. And then you don't know where your data is and what's happening with it. So again, you may get it back, you may not get it back in the same form, but certainly someone still has been, looking at your data and still has copies of it, and there's still ways that they could be monitoring it online in other
Yeah.
places. You're quite likely to have a secondary attack. So proactive measurement is always, always, always better. Backup is a reactive solution. You
Yeah.
need it in place. We would never suggest not having backup in place. But ultimately, it's not a proactive solution, and yeah, it's not going to stop the bad thing from happening.
It's one step, right? It's one part
Yeah,
of the overall solution. And I really like your analogy there. It's sort of like the idea of if you came home and your place had been ransacked, but the people were gone, and you'd be like, "Oh, phew, dodged a bullet there. I guess I can just clean up and go back to back
yeah,
to my daily life," right? Like you absolutely would take, you would 100% take further action. And also that's when you guaranteed you're going to start looking at, well, how can I prevent them from ransacking my house again in the future, right? So it's just that natural progression, and just sort of trying to do that before the ransacking happens. Um, Okay, scrolling through here, I will say again, I want to see Marty sing and dance. So just it's a popular topic, Marty. Um, One of them, interestingly, actually, as you know, because I had mentioned, please type into the Q&A if you're not seeing the answer you want, sort of thing, and the polls. One person saying, and it's a really good point. So just kind of want to highlight as an option. So, the idea of having like being in sort of two different spots there, depending on the relationship and where they are with that customer. So the example here was, we have all in for new MSP customers and then add on for existing, trying to get them to move into it, right? So sometimes you
Yep.
do kind of need a lower bar of entry for some until you can move them up into that next one. So that's a really valid point that sometimes you'll be in sort of two places at once, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And that's an approach, right? So there's two ways to move to this all-in model. There's sort of the aggressive approach of, I'll give you 6 months, everyone's got to move over. Here's the new pricing. And then there's the approach of, as you mentioned, maybe it's for all net new customers, and then you work over time to sort of move your legacy customers onto that model, right? And that's completely acceptable as well too.
Yeah. I think we'll do one more in here. And last one here is, and this one I know, Marty, because I think you almost always get asked this question when we're in new relationships here. How do you feel the most successful partners are pricing Field Effect MDR? How do you see that? And
Yeah.
sorry, that's a very specific question, but maybe you can if there's different flavors of it, or if there's an it depends answer. But I'm interested to hear.
No, I mean, I do get this question a lot, and how much are folks marking this up or whatever, right? And it again, it's not really the way that I would look at it. I think the most successful partners, the way that they're pricing it, is building it into a managed service package,
Mm,
whether that's an all-in model or a better best, even maybe even not a good better best at this point model, where you're wrapping in, you're building in because there's going to be remediation that you're doing here, right? There's going to be things that are happening also. Like, how do we quantify the proactive management stuff that we're allowing folks to do with Field Effect as well too, right? So, there's a number of areas that are building in. So I always find it most effective to build it into your managed service offering at a per user price per month. That also includes many of the other services that you're offering as well too. You're less likely to open yourself up to someone saying like, well, I saw this EDR over here for X amount of user, right? Why can't I, why are you charging me Y or whatever it might be? And it really allows you to monetize the services much better. So I would see the most successful folks in either an all-in or sort of a better best model.
Thank you, everybody, for attending today. And thank you to both Libby and Marty, once again, the Webinar Dream Team, for presenting today.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. It's always great to, like
thank
I said,
you.
to connect with the partners. So yeah, thanks.